I need to tell you what was happening the night my body gave out. I was on the floor of my bedroom. Not dramatically, I didn't fall in slow motion. I slid down the side of the bed and ended up sitting against it, knees up, back against the mattress, staring at the ceiling. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my jaw. My vision was narrowing at the edges. Claire was on the phone. I could hear her voice, calm, steady, the way nurses sound when they're masking fear, giving our address to the dispatcher. And I remember thinking, in the middle of all that noise, this is just finally visible. That's the sentence that never made sense to anyone I said it to afterward. My cardiologist didn't know what to do with it. Claire thought it was the oxygen deprivation, but I knew exactly what I meant. I'm Nathan Cole. I'm 41 years old, and for the last 3 years I've been trying to figure out how to tell this story. I teach history at a high school in Northern Virginia. I've spent my career helping teenagers understand cause and effect, primary sources, the chain of events that explains how we ended up where we are. So, the fact that the most important thing that ever happened to me is something I can barely put into a classroom sentence is not lost on me. That night on the bedroom floor wasn't when it started. It was when something that had been invisible for 6 years finally broke through the surface and became impossible to ignore. And what Jesus showed me in the next few minutes, in the back of an ambulance when my heart had stopped, changed not just my faith, but the way I understand what anxiety actually is, what it's actually doing. If you've been fighting your anxiety for years, if you've prayed and read scripture and done everything right and still woken up with that dread sitting on your chest, if you've quietly started to wonder whether your faith is broken, whether there's something wrong with you that prayer can't seem to fix, then I need you to stay with me. Because what I'm about to tell you isn't a strategy. It isn't a breathing exercise. It's what Jesus actually showed me about what's happening in your mind. And it will change how you see everything. 6 years before that night, something shifted. I can't point to the exact moment. I've tried mapping it out, much like I instruct my students to trace historical timelines looking for the inciting incident. But I never found a clean answer. What I know is that one morning in the spring when I was 35, I woke up and there was something sitting in my chest. Not fear of anything specific, just dread. A formless, sourceless weight that made the morning feel like it was already failing me before I got out of bed. I'm a man of faith. I've been in the church my whole life. I know the verses about fear and peace. So when the dread showed up, my first response was the one any serious Christian reaches for. Prayer. Scripture. I memorized passages about anxiety, wrote them on note cards, and read them before work. The dread didn't care. I tried counseling. Thoughtful, genuinely helpful with a lot of things. But the anxiety remained guarded during our sessions, circling warily like a wild animal avoiding a snare. I'd leave feeling temporarily lighter. Monday morning it would be there again, patient, settled, like it hadn't moved. For a brief period I tried medication. It helped with the physical symptoms. But I felt like I was muffling something rather than addressing it. I mention this not as a prescription, but to show you how many doors I tried. And that's the part that made it so much worse. I couldn't explain it in a way that didn't sound like failure. I know that God hasn't given us a spirit of fear. I believe that with everything in me. So when the fear kept showing up despite the prayer and the scripture and the counseling, what was that telling me? It felt like a verdict. Like evidence that my faith was broken in some way other people's wasn't. Claire knew something was wrong. She's a nurse. She reads bodies, notices what people are hiding behind their functioning. She never pushed too hard. But I'd catch her watching me with that quiet, careful expression, computing something she didn't have enough data to name. I couldn't give her the data. Admitting it fully meant admitting what I couldn't afford to admit, that 6 years of trying had not moved the needle. So I did what a lot of us do. I got very good at carrying it quietly. I taught my classes, showed up for my students, came home to Claire and our kids. I was present, or what passed for present, when a significant portion of your mental energy is managing the low hum of something that has moved in and won't leave. That kind of carrying catches up with you. The body keeps a ledger. By the time I was 41, the ledger had a number in it. The night of the collapse started like most nights. I'd been more tired than usual for a few weeks. Not a new kind of tired, just the accumulated kind. I went to bed at 10. Woke up at 2 in the morning with my heart doing something it had never done before. Not racing in the familiar way. This was a different rhythm. Irregular. Wrong. I sat up and the room shifted. I reached for Claire's arm. Found it. Held it. She woke up with that instant clinical alertness peculiar to nurses. Zero transition from sleep to action. She took one look at me and picked up her phone. I remember trying to stand, and that's when my legs went out. The strength simply evaporated. I collapsed against the side of the bed, entirely unmoored. Claire was already on the line with emergency services, her medical training firmly overriding whatever terror she felt. I lay there looking at the ceiling of our bedroom. We have a water stain in the corner from a leak we had fixed 3 years ago, and I've always meant to repaint that corner and never gotten around to it. That was the last thing I saw before I lost consciousness. A water stain on the ceiling, the most ordinary thing in the world. The paramedics came. They put me on the stretcher. I was in and out, aware of movement, aware of voices, but not tracking them. My heart was doing something arrhythmic. They told me later there was a period of about 2.5 minutes in the back of that ambulance when they were working very hard. I wasn't there for that part. I was somewhere else. I don't know how to describe what happened next in a way that translates accurately into words. I work with primary sources. I understand how much gets lost between an experience and the account of it. What I'm about to tell you has lost something in that gap. But I'm going to try. The sensation of physical location disappeared. That's the best way I can say it. Not darkness. Darkness is still a sensory experience. This was the removal of sensory context altogether. But I wasn't confused. If anything, my mind felt sharper than ever, possessing the stark, echoing clarity of a room stripped bare of all its furniture. And then there was a presence. I want to be careful about this part, because people always want to know what Jesus looks like, and that's not what I can tell you. I didn't visually register a figure. Instead, I became aware of a presence, similar to how you sense a loved one stepping into a room behind you. Not from catching sight of them, not from any specific sound, but from the unmistakable shift in the atmosphere. There was a recognition in me that went deeper than thought. I knew. He didn't speak first. That surprised me, in whatever part of me could still be surprised. He showed me something. I became aware of my entire life, not watching it play out as memories, but seeing it stretched out in front of me as clearly as a historical timeline drawn on a whiteboard. Here is the origin. Here is the sequence. Here is where we are. I could see it with a kind of clarity that didn't require context because the context was already present, all of it, simultaneously. And then I saw something else. There was a layer beneath what I thought of as my life, a dimension that existed alongside everything I'd ever been aware of. Not entirely separate, but resting beneath it, functioning like the concrete foundation beneath a home. You dwell in the rooms. You rarely think about the slab buried in the dirt. But it's there, and its structural integrity dictates everything that happens above ground. There was activity in that layer. Movement. Something was operating there that I had never seen, never known to look for. I felt Jesus gently shifting my awareness toward it, guiding me much like a teacher redirecting a distracted student, not speaking aloud, but sharing an intense, unified focus that comes from beside you rather than toward you. And then I saw what it was. I am not going to soften this. I am going to tell you exactly what I understood in that place, because it is the thing Jesus needed me to bring back. What I saw in that layer beneath my life was not a chemical. It was not a pattern of thought I had trained into myself through bad mental habits. It was not a reflection of unresolved trauma or a nervous system in dysregulation. All of those things can be true and still be incomplete explanations. What I saw was an entity, a spiritual assignment, not what I expected. Even in that moment, even with Jesus standing beside me showing me this, part of me was still the history teacher who wants primary sources, who wants documentation. And he showed me something that answered even that resistance. The entity was assigning thoughts, not creating them from nothing. Thoughts don't work that way. It was inserting specific thoughts into my awareness at specific moments. And what made it so effective what made it invisible for 6 years, was the precision of the imitation. These thoughts sounded exactly like my own inner voice. They used my specific fears, my specific identity, my specific failure points. The thought that said I wasn't praying correctly. The thought that observed how other Christians seemed to have peace I didn't have. The thought that suggested my faith was structurally deficient somehow, that there was a crack in it only I could feel. The thought that my anxiety proved something about me that I couldn't fix with more scripture or more effort. None of those thoughts were mine. I understood that in a single moment with an authority that didn't come from logic. They had been constructed and inserted specifically to target me as a man who cared about faith, who cared about being a good husband and father, who held himself accountable. The assignment had been tailored, because that's what Jesus showed me. This wasn't random. It wasn't the general spiritual climate affecting everyone. It was a targeted spiritual assignment against me, against my identity as a believer, as a father, as a man, with a specific strategic purpose. The purpose was to make me feel that God's peace was unavailable to me, that the promise of Scripture didn't apply to me the way it applied to others, that I was uniquely broken in a way that faith couldn't reach. That is not theology. That is strategy. That is what Paul meant when he wrote about the fiery darts of the wicked one. Not metaphor, mechanism. And then Jesus showed me the door. I want to be precise about this, because people misuse this kind of revelation in ways that cause more damage than the thing they're trying to address. What Jesus showed me was not a spectacular moral failure, not a catastrophic collapse of faith or character. It was something far quieter, and for that reason, much more recognizable. He showed me a season of my life from several years before the anxiety began. A period when I was facing things I could not control. A health issue with one of our children. Some financial pressure that I hadn't told Claire the full weight of. Nothing catastrophic. The kind of pressure that ordinary life produces. In that season, I had adopted a posture. I had moved from faith into management. Not rebellion. I wasn't abandoning God or turning away from the church. I was doing what felt responsible. I was anticipating every possible bad outcome so that I could be ready for it. I was trying to control what I could because what I couldn't control terrified me. It looked, from the outside, like diligence. From the inside, and from that other layer Jesus showed me, it was fear wearing the mask of responsibility. That posture created an opening, not a sudden, violent breach. A gradual, quiet invitation. Just as an unlocked window acts as a beacon to an intruder, even if carelessly left unlatched. And a spirit of fear accepted that subtle invitation. Not loudly, quietly. Slipping inside unnoticed, hiding in the shadows until it became part of the environment. And once it had access, once it had established itself in that hidden layer, it began building. Thought patterns that felt completely native. Interpretations of events that seemed like reasonable responses to real pressures. A voice that sounded exactly like mine, saying things I would plausibly say. 6 years. That's how long it had been doing exactly what it had come to do. Make me feel cut off from the peace of God, from my own identity as a man of faith, from the security of knowing that the same grace that worked for other people could work for me. And it had been working beautifully. Until the night my body couldn't hold the ledger anymore. I came back. I felt myself return to the physical sensation of the ambulance. Metal, vibration, voices, the smell of medical equipment. Claire was at the hospital when I arrived. She held my hand and didn't ask questions. She knew I was somewhere she couldn't follow. They kept me 2 days. My heart had thrown a significant arrhythmia. They wanted to rule out structural damage. There wasn't any. My heart was fine. The doctors wrote about stress and fatigue in their notes, both of which were true and both of which were the house, not the foundation. What I couldn't explain to any of them, not to my cardiologist, not even to Claire, was that I had come back different, not healed exactly. At least, not in the miraculous, instant sense people usually expect when they hear that word in a testimony. The anxiety did not vanish. The familiar weight did not evaporate. But something had fundamentally changed. And the change was this. I could see it now. I knew what I was fighting. I knew where it came from. I knew what it was trying to accomplish. And I knew, with a certainty that came from somewhere more reliable than my own reasoning, that it was not me. That sounds simple. It is simple. It is the simplest thing Jesus showed me, and the thing that changed everything. I was not my anxiety. The voice in my head that said my faith was broken was not my voice. The dread that settled in each morning was not a verdict on my character or my standing before God. It was an assignment. It had a source, it had a purpose, and it had an entry point, all three of which were now visible. Claire noticed the shift before I found words for it. Not in my mood, not in any dramatic external change. She said later that what she saw was a change in how I held myself, like a man who had been looking for something and had found it, not the relief of tension, but the settling of a search that had been exhausting him. I stopped fighting myself. I started addressing the actual target. Over the following months, the weight began to lift, not uniformly, not in a straight line. It unfolded as most genuine transformation does, gradually, with setbacks, with days that looked like nothing had changed, and weeks where the difference was undeniable. But it lifted. The structure the enemy had built over 6 years did not survive the light. A spiritual assignment depends entirely on invisibility. Its power is bound up in being mistaken for you, in making you believe the anxiety is your own failure. The voice is your own voice. The dread is a verdict your faith earned. The moment it is correctly identified, the moment you say, "This is not me, this is an attack, this does not have authority over me," the structure begins to fail, because you are no longer cooperating with it. You were cooperating with it all those years. Not deliberately, not sinfully, because you thought it was you. I want to speak directly to you now. If you have been carrying anxiety for years, if you have prayed and believed and done everything you know to do and the dread keeps showing up, if you've quietly, privately started to wonder whether there's something about you that faith can't fix, I want you to hear me very clearly. The anxiety you are fighting is not you. It is not evidence that your faith is weak. It is not proof that you are praying incorrectly, or that God's peace is somehow less available to you than to other believers. It is not a psychological malfunction that Scripture cannot address. It is not a verdict. It is a war. And the first thing you must understand about a war is who the enemy actually is. Because if you've been directing all of your energy against yourself, fighting the thoughts as though they are your thoughts, resisting the dread as though it is your dread, trying to fix a faith you have been told is broken, then you have been fighting the wrong target for the entire battle. Jesus did not show me this so I could hold on to it. He showed me this so I could give it to you. The sight he gave me in the back of that ambulance, the layer beneath the visible, the assignment operating through an open door, that sight is available to you. Not because you need an NDE to receive it, but because you have access to the same Spirit that showed me what I saw. You are in a war. That is not discouraging. It is the most clarifying news you will ever receive, because it means you are not broken. It means there is an enemy, and enemies can be named, and what is named can be addressed. The door I opened was fear wearing the mask of responsibility. Yours may look different. Grief, isolation, a wound you told yourself you were managing. But somewhere, there is a door that was left ajar in the ordinary vulnerability of being a person under pressure. That is the entry point. And entry points can be closed. Not by fighting harder. Not by memorizing more verses as weapons against yourself. By recognizing the war for what it is, addressing the assignment with the authority that belongs to you as a follower of Jesus, and closing the door through which it came. 3 years ago, I lay on a bedroom floor convinced I was dying, and I looked up at a water stain on the ceiling I had always meant to paint over. I thought I was at the end of something. I was at the beginning. If this testimony has given you sight, if something in what I've described has named what you have been carrying, then do not hold it alone. Share it with someone in your life who needs to hear it. Because this is exactly how the assignment loses ground. Not in isolation, but in community, in the light, where the things that depend on darkness cannot survive. You are not broken. You are in a battle. And now you know it. That changes everything.